CFPR Lunchtime Seminar Series. And my name is Poktira Vichichainan, and I'm a co-director of CFPR, and I will moderate today's sessions. So today we are very honored to have Professor Kyungmin Kim joining us from South Korea. So Professor Kim is an assistant professor of child development and family studies at Seoul National Universities, but she spent a lot of time in her early career at UMass Boston in the US and just returned to Korea recently. So she is an international expert who is very well known for her work on intergenerational relations in later life. So her innovative research addresses the dynamic aspects of intergenerational relations across different levels of analysis and at different time levels. So her work helps us better understand social support exchanges between older parents and their adult children in normal and everyday relationship, as well as family caregiving issues in aging families. So not only do these topics have theoretical importance in the gerontological or sociological literature, but they also have wide policy implications. So today Professor Kim will share with us her research titled Intergenerational Relations in Family Contexts, Multiple Perspective and Multiple Relationships Within Families. So without further ado, please let me now hand over to Professor Kim. And for audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to type your question in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll go through them during the Q&A. So Professor Kim, please.
Thank you for introducing me. I will share my screen. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my work and virtually meet you all today. I'm Kyungmin Kim at Seoul National University. So, in the lives of older adults, the family relations is one of the most important elements of a successful aging. The importance of a family tie sounds very obvious, but it is not that easy to examine the parent-child ties and the implication for health and well-being, because individual parent-child ties are nested within families involving multiple members from different generations. So for individual members, some ties are very harmonious, but some are strained, or some ties are very mixed within the family. So using quantitative method, I have tried to better understand the complexity of intergenerational relations within families. As Pug introduced, these are my 4 specific themes of my research, is to examine intergenerational ties within family context. My work has considered multiple perspectives and multiple relations within families. Also, to better understand the family processes and their implications for health and well-being, I have examined the temporal dynamics of intergenerational ties, including day-to-day variation and longer-term changes of family interactions and well-being. So far, I have much worked on the data set on US families, but as a Korean scholar, I'm also interested in the cultural context contributing to variations in the family ties. Finally, my research has re-examined the family caregiving context and interventions for family caregivers of old adults with a disability, for example, the dementia. Today, I would like to talk about my work regarding the first theme, the multiple relationships, multiple perspectives within families. I will talk about the series of studies rather than focusing on one study. So regarding intergenerational relations, the family systems theory emphasized the importance of multiple perspectives or multiple relationships within a family, the interactions across the subsystems within a family, the parent-child system, marital system, sibling system, and also the mechanisms generating within and between family differences. So multiple perspectives within families are about the multiple informants and whether different members' views on the same family issues are similar or not. The multiple relations within families could be based on the report from one informant per family, but the informants reported relationships with the multiple members. For example, how support is distributed across multiple offspring or multiple parents within families. In examining these issues, I've considered the structural and the psychological factors both. So individuals' behaviors in families may be explained by their structural situation, but also reflect their subjective and the psychological aspect. I will tell you a little bit about the data set I used, family exchange studies. This study is funded by NIH, currently publicly available. Since my doctoral program, I have been working with this study. This is a multi-generation, multi-reporter family data set. In 2008, the middle-aged target participants complete a series of questions about all living parents and all grown children. Also, this study interviewed part of the family members, aging parents, grown offspring, and the target's spouse. The data set was collected in the Philadelphia metropolitan area. By starting in a single geographic area, researchers can take into account the specific features of the urban area and oversampling the specific reasons. In this study, Black families were oversampled, almost 35%. Of course, parents and offsprings of the target participant could reside in other areas, so it added additional heterogeneity in geographic distance among family members. In 2013, we completed the second wave of data, following these family members with 5-year intervals. The second wave data set include another interesting feature, 7-day daily diary and the 4-day cortisol collection of the target participants and their family members. So, and we are preparing proposal for the third wave follow-up now. So regarding the multiple perspectives within families, one of the main critiques in the intergenerational research is that most studies have relied on the reports from one generation and often just a single person to represent the family relations. So for more comprehensive picture of intergenerational dynamics within the family system, taking into account the multiple perspectives of family members is essential. But having multiple perspectives raises a question. Are different family members' views are in agreement or not? Observed discrepancies in the views may be regarded as a random measurement error, but discordant views on the same event, the same relationships can be meaningful if it is systematically associated with something. So I focused on the support exchanges. So there are many aspects to characterize parent-child ties in adult families. For example, how often they visit and talk by phone, how close they feel toward each other. Among these aspects, especially how often parents and the children help each other practically, emotionally, financially is very important. Support exchanges are critical for meeting practical needs and sustaining bonds over the life course. Also, it became a foundation of a reciprocal obligation in times of crisis or when long-term help is needed. So regarding reporting discrepancies, we can think about the universal tendencies toward self-enhancement. The people generally view their own actions in a more positive light, the reporting giving more than others' actions, the reporting receiving less. So, but the structural and the psychological context of family relations may also contribute to discrepancies in the perceptions of intergenerational exchanges. And also we consider these 4 sources of discrepancies. First, when one generation has fewer economic and social resources than the other, the imbalance may affect the perception of support exchanges. Second, dyadic characteristics such as gender composition and living arrangement can contribute to shared perception and the similarity. The third, when obligations toward parents or children are strong, individuals are more likely to present a culturally desirable response regarding support. Finally, individuals who view the relationship as more important would report more support they are providing and receiving. This is related to the role centrality theory and the developmental stake hypothesis. So first, I examined the level and the directions of the discrepancies and related factors. So I used the 337 parent-child dyads from the FES data. On average, the parent's age was 76 and the child age was 50. So the middle-aged children and the older parents. And we look at the two different directions of exchanges, downward flow from parents to children and upward flow from children to parents. I used the multi-level modeling. The positive discrepancy scores, it means the children reported more than parents reported. And the negative discrepancy scores mean the parents reported more than children reported. And I found in upward exchanges, the Offspring consistently reported giving more support than parents reported receiving. All types of support show the same direction of discrepancies, and the discrepancies in the total support was significant. But the downward exchanges, parents reported giving more practical assistance, but less advice than children reported receiving. The discrepancies, the total support was not significant. So upward exchanges, the self-enhancement was fully supported. Children reported giving more than parents reported receiving. But in downward exchanges, the self-enhancement was partially supported. Parents reported giving more practical assistance, but giving less advice than children reported receiving. But less advice may still reflect the self-enhancement because advice giving is often interpreted by older adults as being intrusive and interfering in children's lives. We also found these factors are systematically associated with the reporting discrepancies, especially psychological aspects that have most consistent significant effect on discrepancies. So support exchanges are often regarded as a relatively objective aspect of intergenerational ties, and many studies have relied on one informant to collect the data. But this study shows that relying on one informant would produce biased pictures of the support, reflecting dyadic situations and the relationship characteristics. We saw even general self-enhancement processes are modified by the parent-child context, depending on the type of support and whether the reporter is a parent or a child. And I wanted to introduce another study. I participated in another study about the relationship dynamics between very old and their old children. Due to the dramatic increase in the life expectancy, very old parents and their old children are fast growing group worldwide. So the parents and the children are aging together, literally. So care needs of oldest older parents can be substantial, and the children may also face their own age-related issues. So, but we don't know much about their relationship dynamics. So this is the dyadic and mixed method study on very old parents and their children in Boston area, funded by NIH. We just finished the data collection. We are writing a paper out of this data set. And also, actually, we collected a comparable dyadic data from Korea for international comparisons, and we just started analyzing the data also. So in this study, we asked the same support exchange measures to 112 parent-child dyads and look at the discrepancies in their reports. This is the finding. In upward exchanges, Offspring consistently reporting giving more support than parents who reported receiving, as we saw in the FES sample. But in downward exchanges, parents are reported giving less consistently, but the children reported receiving more. This is quite interesting. The opposite direction of the self-enhancement theory in very late stage of parent-child ties. So in the very old parent-child dyads, definitely the upward exchanges occurred more frequently than downward exchanges. In upward flow, the children reported more support given, but in the downward flow, the children reported more support received. This may reflect the children's appreciation of support from parents in very old age. At this stage, the children may not expect support from their parents, so they are more likely to appreciate what they receive from parents. So far, I analyzed the one dyad per family, but I was wondering which families involving multiple parent-child dyads can be more congruent in their perspectives on support. So to address this question, I pulled across all available 929 parent-child dyads across the 3 generations within families from FDS data, so where both the dyadic members were interviewed. So which families are more congruent? The relationship quality among family members matters for downward exchanges given to children by parents. The red dotted lines show the general tendencies observed in the parent-child dyads out of self-enhancement tendency. So in families with the better relationships among family members, children tended to report receiving more, and the parents reported giving less. So discrepancies between parent and the children were attenuated. This almost looked like a parallel, no discrepancies. This is consistent with the characteristics of well-functioning families in which offspring tended to appreciate the support received from parents, and the parents are willing to provide support to their offspring. However, the families with a poorer relationship among family members, children tended to report receiving less, and the parents reported giving more. So discrepancies elevated. So this study shows the importance of a family emotional environment in the perceptions of support exchanges. The result may also indicate that how each generation perceived the exchanges would be a good marker of overall quality of the family relationships. So beside the views on the support exchanges, examining discrepant the perspectives in aging families could be important. For example, discrepant the expectations over future care and inheritance issues between older parents and their middle-aged offspring can be a source of the family strain. Also, when older adults begin to have difficulties in everyday functioning, family members, especially adult children, often provide instrumental emotional assistance and serve as a healthcare proxy. Therefore, whether family members have accurate knowledge of the older parents, older members' healthy condition, care preferences, and end-of-life plans can be a significant and substantial issues. I used a different data set and I tried to examine these issues. So next, I'm switching to examining multiple perspectives within families. So most parents are involved in the support exchanges with more than one grown child. So obviously decisions to provide assistance and support to a member affected by other relationships within a family. So think about relationships with our parents and the siblings. However, as I said before, prior studies typically aggregate support to all children or select one focal child. So it was not possible to figure out if any observed differences in support came from differences between families or within families. Most within family difference studies have focused on examining factors to explain the differences in support given to each child. Which child gets more? So this variable-centered approach is very useful to test the theories regarding parental motives. So for example, according to altruistic model, less well-off children would get more support from parents because the parents care about their well-being. So exchange theory posits that children who helped the parents in the past would receive more support because the support represents a kind of a payment. The contingency theory says that the children in need would receive more support. However, this variable-centered approach may not helpful when we describe how parents allocate their resources among adult children at the family level. So these existing theories and the most empirical studies have used the child as the conceptual and analytic units, so provided only indirect evidence for variability within families. So we just know what the child factors are associated with the more parental support, but we don't know how support is distributed among children. So in this regard, a family-centered or typology approach emphasizes the importance of patterns, overall patterns of interactions within families. So these days, many researchers are using a typology approach to combine multiple indicators of intergenerational ties. But the most typology studies have only addressed the dyadic patterns occurring within individual parent-child dyads. This is a little, there is no information regarding family patterns involving multiple relationships. To fill this gap, I examined the family patterns of a parental support given to multiple children. So, how families may differ in the parental support. This graph shows 4 hypothetical examples. The first, the families can differ in the mean level of support. On average, some parents may provide more support to their children than other families. Families also can differ in how support is distributed across adult children, equally or unequally. It's a family variability. Then why families differ in parental support? I consider the 3 sets of factors. The first of factors would be parental resources, such as time, energy, and money. These parental resources could represent capacity to provide more support. The parents who have a limited material resources are likely to show differential investment across offspring. Also, parents who have fewer psychosocial resources like a high depression, high marital distress may differentiate more. Second set of factors is parental beliefs about the helping adult children. The ability of the parents to provide support does not necessarily mean they provide such support to grown children. Actual support behaviors may be conditioned by normative beliefs about the helping children, adult children. So parents feel different level of obligation toward adult children depending on their characteristics. So also in Western countries, strong norms call for parents to treat their children equally. The last set of factors is offspring composition characteristics. So for example, how many children are there, all are biological children, age and gender composition, and there is any residing child. These characteristics may affect both level and the differentiation of parental support. So we first tried to classify family patterns by combining mean level and differentiation. Also, we examined factors distinguishing the family patterns. So from the middle-aged target sample in FES, we chose 431 parents who have at least 2 grown children because we are interested in differentiation. So the number of children was 2.7 on average and ranged to 2 children to 10 children. So average age of a parent was 52 and age of the youngest child was 22. So parents report how frequently they provided these 6 types of support to each child. So this graph shows raw scores of support given to each child. The connected lines indicate the same family. So we can see substantial within family variability, actually. To describe the variability within and between families, we calculate the intra-class correlation, it's ICC. So ICC for parental support was 0.4. That means 60% of variance came from within families and 40% of variance came from between families. So a larger portion of the variance was explained by within family variability rather than the between family differences. Based on these raw scores, we calculate the two family indicators, so mean level and differentiation. So mean level was calculated by average score of support given to all children within a family. Differentiation was calculated by deviation scores from the family mean, the family deviation. To classify family pattern of parental support, we used the latent profile analysis, and we conducted a multinomial logistic regression. So these four patterns show the distinct combination of the mean level and differentiation. High support, low differentiation, medium support, high differentiation, low support, low differentiation, low support, very high differentiation. So these graphs will help understand the patterns. As the first, these two patterns show the low differentiation patterns, very similar across children. The first support, the support was provided equally among children, but the first pattern showed a high support, the level is higher, and the third pattern showed a low support overall. Almost 70% families belong to these two patterns. Next, these two patterns showed high to very high differentiations. So we can see substantial differences within families, especially in the pattern 4. One child does not get support at all, but the other child gets support every day. So 31% of families belong to these patterns. So we examined family characteristics of these patterns using first pattern as a reference group. So the pattern 2, the medium support, high differentiation families are likely to have a non-biological offspring, larger family size, and bigger age gaps between offspring, so compared to the reference pattern. In pattern 3, low support, low differentiation pattern, the parents was more likely to be father and have lower feelings of obligation toward adult children. In terms of offspring characteristics, the children were more likely to include non-biological offspring and older children and live in a separate household from parents. And that makes sense. Finally, the fourth pattern, low support, very high differentiation families, showed the parents was more likely to be remarried and ever divorced. This is a remarried cases, and also showed a higher level of depressive symptoms. And the parents showed lower beliefs about the equal treatment. The children were more likely to be younger and show bigger age gaps between offspring. So this study showed that families are different in the mean level of support as well as the variability among children. The 69% of families showed a low differentiation pattern. Support was equally distributed across offspring in the substantial proportion of US families. And 31% of the families belonged to high differentiation patterns. In these families, the mean level appeared to represent just the middle point of the support between offspring who gets the most and the least. So family patterns of parental support show the different associations with the range of family characteristics, including parental resources, parental beliefs about obligation and equal treatment, and offspring composition. This suggested that we needed to capture within family processes of support exchanges among multiple children for the future directions. We just look at the multiple children. Then how about the multiple parents? So many people can think about only two parents, a mother and father, but the married adults can have multiple parents to consider in providing support, own parents and parents of spouse. So for this study, I used the Korean data set because I could not find the good data set in US. They are not interested in the parents-in-law. So in the Western countries, adult children give greater priority of their time and resources to their own parents than in-laws. Also, they showed a strong matrilinear preference, the prefer wife parents, but Asian countries traditionally have a patrilinear family system. Sons and the daughters-in-law are expected to provide the primary support for their older parents. Married daughters tended to provide only supplementary support for their own parents through emotional connections. The recent changes have challenged the traditional patterns in Asian countries. Some people have argued that these changes represent the bilateralization of kinship ties in Asian families. That is a more balanced set of relationships between parents and the parents-in-law. But it's not clear how much variability exists in the cultural practices regarding intergenerational exchanges in the Korean families. So we examined the middle-aged adults' reports on their support exchanges with both parents and the parents-in-law. We combined 12 indicators of support, the 3 types of support: emotional, instrumental, financial, and 2 directions of flow, giving and receiving, and 2 sets of parents, parents-in-law. So we found 5 distinct patterns. The first 3 are balanced pattern between parents and parents-in-law. So you can see the same pattern between parents and parents-in-law. The exchange patterns are identical between these 2 sets of parents. The first pattern showed a high exchange with both sets of parents. Second pattern showed the low exchanges with both. Third pattern showed the giving pattern, more giving than receiving with both sets of parents. The last 2 patterns are unbalanced between parents and the parents-in-law. The solid line showed pattern 4, exchange only with the own parents. This pattern consists almost of men. The final pattern, the dotted line, showed the moderate high exchange with the own parents, but giving financial and instrumental support to parents-in-law, but no emotional support exchange with the parents-in-law. This is a typical obligatory pattern toward the parents-in-law. This pattern is almost a woman. So further, these exchange pattern with the parents and parents-in-law were associated with the positive marital quality for men and the negative marital quality for women. So this study showed the examination of exchanges with the multiple parents, the parents-in-law, could reveal changing the cultural context for intergenerational ties. It is interesting that a substantial proportion of adult children, about 60%, reported a balanced pattern of exchanges between parents and parents-in-law. This may underscore the shift of the Korean families from traditional patrilinear kinship ties. But also, we found 2 unbalanced patterns. The pattern 4 is consistent with the typical patrilinear tradition. The pattern 5 is a quite interesting obligatory pattern toward the parents-in-law, but also keeping frequent exchanges with their own parents, women. So they are almost women. So for these women, the obligatory duties and the responsibilities toward the parents-in-law still persist and are carried out with low emotional support. But in contrast to the traditional pattern, this group of women maintains the strong ties and the exchanges with their own parents. This is a unique cultural response to social changes that blends traditional help to parents-in-law with the more egalitarian and the bilateral kinship relationships. Exchange pattern with the parents and the parents-in-law were associated with the offspring marital quality. So with the decline of the culturally prescribed obligation in Asian countries, the decision of whom to help and how much help to give may depend more on the voluntary decisions. So the marital quality may become a key factor in terms of how they distribute their limited resources between parents and the parents-in-law. So research has revealed the significance of parent-child ties by linking these ties to individual health and well-being. However, in examining implications for individual well-being is not that simple. First, there are many aspects to characterize parent-child ties in adult families. As I said before, how often they visit, how often they help each other, how much affection they feel, as well as a conflict or distress. Parent-child ties cannot be characterized by a single dimension of the relationships. Second, the most families include multiple the parent-child relationship. For example, middle-aged adults usually have more than one child and often have two living parents as a sandwiched generation. So in this study, we attempt to address the complexity of intergenerational ties and examining implications for individual well-being. So I analyzed the data, FES wave 1. So we used the middle-aged participant report on all living parents and all grown children. So final sample size of 2,252 parent-child ties nested within 633 middle-aged participants. So middle-aged participants about the 51 years old, older parents were 77 and grown offspring were 24. These are the multi-generation families. To characterize the parent-child ties, we included 5 indicators in structural, functional, and emotional dimensions. And we found these 7 types of parent-child ties. So first 3 types were all characterized by low contact, low support. These types were distinct from each other in terms of relationship qualities, detached, harmonious, and conflicted. And the fourth type of support, the fourth type of ties also showed a low contact, but the medium level of support. And the positive and negative relationship qualities were both high. So we labeled ambivalent ties. And the last 3 types involved more frequent contact, and in terms of emotional qualities, they were conflicted, ambivalent, and harmonious. So these types are about each individual ties with the child 1, with the child 2, with the child 3, and with the mothers, with the fathers, each individual ties. And to examine implication of these parent-child ties for psychological well-being, we need to summarize these multiple ties at the level of a participant. So we used 2 within-family summary indicators at the participant and the family level. First, we used having each type of parent-child ties within family. So each type, having each type of the ties or not. So this table showed the proportion of a participant who had each type of parent-child ties within the family. And the second, for variability of parent-child ties, we calculated entropy scores, which represent dispersion across types of parent-child ties within families. Entropy scores are scaled to range from 0 to 1. The entropy score 0 means all parent-child ties in a single type, no variability within families. So the first graph shows the example of 0 entropy, no variability cases. So these 4 examples show the 4 participants who have 5 ties. So first cases, just all 5 ties are type 7, same type. And in contrast, the entropy score 1 means the equal number of parent-child ties in each of the type, complete variability within families. The last graph shows the example of a high entropy, high variability cases. This person has a different type of ties. So the more diverse ties within the families. So we used these 2 family indicators as a predictor for psychological well-being. So among 7 types of parent-child ties, the type characterized by conflicted ties actively engaged conflicted was associated with the more depressive symptoms and the lower life satisfaction. And the greater variability was associated with the more depressive symptoms. It's interesting. The detrimental effect of within family variability may reflect the different reasons for variability. It is possible that families with the greater variability have some family members who suffer long-standing issues which may not be captured by recent health or other life problem. Further, the responding to different needs and their situations of the family members, middle-aged adults may view their differentiated relationship as violating the norms of equality, which can lower their psychological well-being. So it is needed to investigate which factors affect their within family variability. So I just introduced my work regarding multiple perspectives and the multiple relationships. So for the future directions, the first, the multiple perspective within families, it might be helpful to examine the mechanisms of linking discrepancies in the perspective to individual well-being and the family relationships. And also for the policy and the intervention program, so protocols for improving communication within families to ensure that the social and the medical decisions are made in such a way that the family members can agree and support. And regarding the multiple relationship with the families and the family patterns, I think it would be helpful to examine how family patterns change over time and what events, normative events, non-normative events contribute to change in the family pattern as a whole. And also which family members instigate the changes in the family patterns. So actually we don't have enough knowledge, enough information about these family patterns and the changes in the family dynamics. So that's it. I just brought very quickly introduced my program of work.
Thank you so much, Kyungmin. I mean, very interesting, and I'm just impressed with the kind of data that you have, right? That is not that common in a number of aging surveys, particularly in Asia. So so now the floor is open. So you can raise your hand or you can type in your question in the chat box. So please let me, Jeremy, do you want to ask a question? Maybe you can introduce yourself briefly as well.
Hi, Prof. Kim. I'm Jeremy. I'm a PhD student here at NUS. So I'm a big fan of your work. And very wonderful seminar. It was so much. I think you presented at least 5 papers. So it was really, really comprehensive. And my question is about the within family approach, which I think is really groundbreaking. But I understand most of your papers on within family approach are done in the US. So I'm just wondering, do you have any plans to bring this approach to East Asian countries? And if so, are the current data sets that we have, like PROSA, JSTAR, Charles, do you think they're adequate, or is new data required for them? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, actually, thank you for mentioning my work. This is the second semester in Korea, so I started thinking about replicating the FES data in Korea. Actually, the current Kyungmin is very supportive to replicate the family exchange studies in Korean context. So it might be very interesting. But currently, I don't have the comparable data in Korea and other Asian countries. But I have used the HRS data, and then I used the dyadic data from the HRS. But most of the dyadic the data in HRS is a couple couple dietic data, not the parent-child dietic data. So, but I think HRS or the CLOSA and also in any other countries, the HRS the data set has some information about the multiple children.
Mhm.
I think, yeah. So I haven't used HRS a multiple relationship data set, but it could be possible using the HRS related data set.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Now, Dahai Kim? Could you
Yeah, it's also Korean name, Dae Kim.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay, no problem. Hi, Prof. Here is another huge fan of your work. So yeah, I'm also a Korean student studying in US right now. And then one part of the presentation that you brought up that self-enhancement theory wasn't supported, and parents actually felt they gave lesser. They gave more. They gave lesser than what children have received. In Korean context was really like interesting for me. What do you think would explain the difference between like Korea and the US? Do you think it's because of like Asian moms and lots of dependence between like, you know, parents and children? So do you think the feeling of the sense of obligations about like children's education and marriage will explain the difference in your work?
Yeah, actually, though, I did not present a Korean data set regarding this discrepancy issues. So all the work is from the US. The first one is from the FES. The second one is a Boston study. But we are just ready to examine Korean data set. It might be, I'm really eager to see the pattern in Korea. Is a similar pattern or the different unique pattern in Korea? Yeah, I cannot wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got mixed up, sorry. Yeah, and the second question that I wanted to ask you was in the similar line, right? Parental support changes over time, right? As children are getting aged. So I don't know much about the US context, but I guess like preschoolers in the US might take lesser money, but more time. And then the trend will go reverse over time. So if we want to see the dynamics of parental support over the life cycle, is it plausible? And are there many like literature out there? So I just wanted to ask your plan about this in your future work. Thank you.
Thank you. Presenting support patterns, I just show the overall pattern, total support across the different type of support, but definitely it's worth to look at the specific type of support, tangible versus non-tangible, emotional versus financial. So the type of the support that might have a different meaning at the different life stages, but sometimes it's too many to present and to summarize. But I think it's just for each different stages, so that we might need to look at the different type of the support and the different meanings, the different implications for individuals. But yeah.
Yeah, that's all for me. Yeah, that's all for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a number of questions, but before I ask my own question, I would like to see if anyone else have questions for Kyungmin. So I wonder, so let me ask question, and if you guys have questions, feel free to raise your hand, okay? So I have two questions for now. So Kyungmin, when you pair, in your analysis, right, when you pair between parent and child, right? So or in the data sets too, if they have multiple, if the parents have multiple children, how do you choose like which children to pair in that dyad? And I mean, is it randomly assigned or, does that make sense?
The FES design asked about each of all children. So I included all possible dyads
Wow.
in the data set, not just pick the picking the focal child was a traditional approach.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes the first child or the closest child or the most problematic child, but so we just saw it cannot represent the whole picture of the family and the parent-child ties. So the within family difference approaches has a uniqueness in they ask the relationship with each of the children, each of the parents.
So my follow-up question is that do you have a lot of missing data then? I mean, some children may not want to answer, or especially in the US, right, where family may live far apart from one another.
Right. It's very hard to keep the participant in the study, especially for the larger families, that they should answer up to 12 or 13 children. The repeated the same set of questions as a child 1, child 2, child 3. So it's very hard to keep our sample in the data set in the study, actually. So actually, we did not repeat the whole set of questions to each of the children. General question asked about each of the children, and then we have the selected set of question only for up to 4 or 3 focal children.
Right. Well, I mean, this made me appreciate the work even more, right? I mean, it's and all the work and energy that went into data collection. My second quick question is, when you observe this discordance between parent and child report exchanges, gender, do you find any gender differences in terms of if it's daughter, mother, daughter, father, and those kind of
actually, in the model, we controlled the gender composition: mother, the mother, daughter, mother, son, something like that. But we did not find the systematic the association with the gender composition. But as I said, the psychological and the perceptions of the relationship is most consistent and significant factors.
Okay. All right. All right. So I think Jung-Moo have questions. Jung-Moo, Jung, do you want to ask questions?
Hi, Professor Kim. Thank you very much for this very exciting and comprehensive work. And so my name is Jung-Moo, and I'm an assistant professor at sociology at NUS. And so my question actually echoes some of Puck's questions on the measurement of the dyadic matching of the parents and the children's support, giving and receiving. And so aside from the potential gender differences, is that possible that, for example, the parents may tend to be more conservative in these subjective ratings, both regarding how much they give and how much they receive from the children. But on the other hand, the child generation might be exaggerating, right? And that pattern could also, like, for example, differ, of course, across gender or across one's life course stages. So for example, for the parents, many of them have already retired, so they have a more peaceful mind, and so they might be like more tolerant about this level of support received. But on the other hand, the children might be like struggling with multiple tasks, so they may like psychologically like underestimate or under-evaluated the level of support they receive. And so I guess a related question to that is that besides these more subjective ratings, would you like consider, for example, using like more objective measures, like the actual, for example, monetary support or support for housing, for example? That's actually a big issue for Chinese youth, that it's so expensive, and so many of them receive direct monetary support for household establishment. And so probably just as some robustness check to match up on those more objective measures and see if the patterns still persist. But thank you very much. I enjoyed the talk so much and I learned a lot.
Oh, thank you. Actually, the discrepancies are usually examined in terms of the emotional quality, more subjective measures, and not that frequent in the support exchanges, because we regard it more, it's a kind of objective. So even some discrepancies, maybe just the measurement errors or something like that. But I thought still the discrepancies is the support could be something, could be meaningful. Yeah. But and also we need to consider, we just observe the discrepancies, but we don't know whose report is more accurate.
Right. Yeah. And so if it's random, then it probably will balance out across the population. But for example, if there are some like more systematic bias across gender, across generations, and then it may bias the patterns in some theoretically informed directions, right? Yeah. And also like for example, like grandparenting, and now especially for many Asian countries, that's a very common practice. And so I mean, yeah, it would be interesting just to put aside those interesting patterns based on the subjective measures with this objective support measures, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Grandparent, grandchild, the relationship is also very interesting topic. But in terms of the multiple perspective and multiple relationship, it's very tricky, because they have one grandparent, the multiple grandkids. Which grandkids matter for me? Something like that. Also from the perspective of grandkids. Which grandparent, mother side, father side, grandmother or grandfather. So it's very hard to anchor. So still very complicated in the parent-child, but the grandparent, the grandchild, oh my.
I know, yeah. But thank you very much. It's such an exciting project. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Kyungmin, I have one question from a graduate student. So he said, thanks, Professor, for a great presentation. He's curious about within generation discrepancies in the perception of support or care that they received, whether there will be a third person effects. That means if one child has brothers or sister, whether he or she thinks his or her siblings receive more support or care than him or herself.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting. Yeah, I just control the number of the children, the size, the family size, but the more specifically that we need to examine the specific role of other children, other siblings. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
But sometimes I'm struggling. How can we do in the quantitative analysis? In conceptually and anecdotally, we can think about the effect from other sibling, other members. It's very obvious, but how can we examine in the data set? How can we make the concrete model, the effect from other persons in the family system?
Right. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone last questions? Okay, great.
Can I ask the last question?
Sure.
Yeah. Hi. So I know that there is a lot of discourses going on about the concept of change. The concept of family, right? So we need to incorporate like different types of families, like a single mom, same-sex marriage, no children, and everything. So how are you planning to incorporate those changing discourse of family into your analysis, or?
For now, the most of the multi-generation family data are not very diverse. Yeah, especially in the FES data emphasizing we have 35% of Black. It's a diverse sample. But in terms of other characteristics, it's a very still not enough. So
those parent-child relationship that in the FES studies, they're all intact family, meaning that
No.
this is not, so this could include stepchildren,
Yeah.
step-parents.
Stepchildren and then this adopted children. So that's the reason I considered it all biological children or not, something like that.
Okay.
Mhm. But the still lack of the diversity in terms of the sexuality and the race, ethnicity, and the type of marriages or something like that.
Right. Okay. All right. Do you have more questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. And, you know, so by way of closing, I'd like to thank Kyungmin again for sharing her work with us. And we're looking forward to hear more from her, especially on the new data sets she's planning to collect with regards to the Korean family and these, you know, intergenerational ties and exchanges. So I would like to also thank the audience for your participation and contribution to this engaging Q&A. So I will see you next week. So next week we have a speaker from Michigan State University. She will talk about Professor Kathy Louie, a sociologist, and her paper will look at loneliness among sexual minority elderly in the US. So please join us, and next week we'll meet at 10 a.m. All right, well, thank you so much, Kyungmin, and I'm looking forward to catch up with you more later. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.